The topic is the rise of the family investment offices and where do they go beyond 2019. So we have three professionals who all are in family offices who are going to share their thoughts. So Amy has pulling double duty, as she said. She's today's Oprah Winfrey, which is an awesome place. So we appreciate, and let's give Amy a round for kind of pulling double duty here and running these two wonderful talks. So let's bring up our three panelists. So we have Fethi Sambachi Kanishli. Please come up and let's give him a hand. We also have Shalale Gordon. Thank you. Welcome. Yes, easier for me.
Hi there.
And then we have Anirudh Damani as well. So please come up. All three. Excellent. All yours.
All right. So we're going to break form up here for a minute. And I do apologize. I'm standing in for somebody here. So I forgot their bios. So we're going to have each one of our panelists introduce themselves. And we're entrepreneur. Like, we break rules. It's okay to break protocol every once in a while, right?
Always.
I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah.
Breaks rules.
Yeah.
So let's go down the panel here and give me your name and a little bit about your background. Yeah. Beyond that, I could not pronounce your names even if I practiced for like a week. It's too complicated. So let's go down the row here, and then we'll get into some questions.
Yeah, cool. Well, my name is Fethi. I'm the founder of SAS Ventures. It's the venture division of our venture capital arm within the family office. So we have different divisions like private equity, real estate, social impact investing, and very recently, 2 years ago, I founded the SAS Ventures. And it's been a long road, but I think we'll get into that more. Me personally, I actually come from a very different background than VC investing or startup investing, which is, I have a background in real estate, which is basically very stable, you know, and sustainable. And on the other side, you have the very risky part now, which I converted to VC. So when you were talking about like breaking rules sometimes, I actually done that. So, yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Shalali. I am the founder and the chairman of Inji Family Office. I am also the head of investment committee for Vinci Venture Capital. I am a third generation Inji family member, so I'm also on the board of Inji Holding. My background is also not so related to VC. I'm originally an industrial engineer. I have worked in healthcare, I have worked in PR, I have worked in marketing, and finally I have worked in finance, and that is kind of how my journey to the family office began.
Hi, Anirudh Damani. So I'm a fourth generation entrepreneur from my family. I set up the family office under the name of Artha India Ventures, which invests in renewable energy assets and uses the proceeds from those renewable energy assets to invest into startups. And the exits from startups are used to buy more renewable energy assets. So we created sort of a sustainable way of investing in a way. And my personal career started off, I sold long-term energy contracts in West Texas, knocking door to door, and eventually ended up becoming an owner of the company, sold it, and then used the liquidity to actually start off the family office. Now I've got a few uncles and my father who's joined in to the family office as well.
Okay, so what I want to do at this point, because we have a lot of early stage startups in the audience, and I mean, it's a startup competition, so not surprising. Can we, each one of you, have a conversation about what exactly is a family investment office and why it matters and what makes it relevant for this audience?
Yeah. Well, family office is obviously been there for many years. Like it's an investment group controlled by family, and so especially in the last 10 years, it's been more around, especially after the crisis in 2009, where up until then the returns were bigger with the whole leverage situation, and well after that, we've seen more of these family offices investing more into early stage startups because basically simple reason was that they wanted to have better returns as they had in the past. And so I think it's a different kind of vehicle for startups to see and work with family offices, because family offices, like, the most important thing about a family office is that they're patient capital, which means, like, yeah, we have obviously, like, we want to make 3x or more, 5x, whatever that return success thing is for other VCs. But at the end of the day, a family office always thinks in the long run. So we will not have people telling us, go invest, how many companies did you invest, when are you going to liquidate this, etc. So I think it's a different type. And if we look around the world, family offices usually in their portfolio now, they have like around 9% of their portfolio in VC or either alternative investments. So I think in the following 10 years, we're going to see more of this, as obviously we see more startups and technology developing.
I think that's really interesting. And so I want to ask you guys, so there's a perception problem, because, you know, my understanding, and I just read an article in Forbes, is that this is a high net worth prospect, right? And to say that, you know, there's now a startup component, it seems like there are some, you know, like, to get that message out, there are some challenges for what you guys do. Like, what would you say to our room full of startups? Like, what are the advantages to looking at this, and what are the challenges?
So, you know, one thing you got to understand is that family offices traditionally have got liquidity from being entrepreneurs themselves. So typically, this is going to be multi-generational wealth, and there's going to be a big network that comes with it. So when you're looking at applying to a family office, understand that they may not write the entire round, they may be a little bit slow, but they bring with them very patient capital, correctly said, but they're also extremely flexible, and they'll have a huge network, right? And because family offices traditionally, and before 2009, used to typically invest through venture capital funds. It's only in the last 10 years that family offices have stopped investing or reduced their reliance on venture capital fund and venture capital fund managers, and they're doing more direct deals. And they're getting a lot more active. There's a lot more family office professionals, as they would call themselves. So when you apply to a family office, understand that they bring with them a lot of stuff that maybe even a traditional VC may not bring along, and definitely they'll bring with them a huge network of entrepreneurs that you can tap into from a very high level.
Would you add anything to that?
Yes, actually, those are exactly the talking points that I had about patient capital network. When you look at family offices, as you said, the family companies, they have a strategy and they invest through their strategies usually. Whereas the family offices, it's more personal and they can go to other areas that are outside of a family business strategy as well. And if we look around the world, there are $3 to $4 trillion that are controlled by family offices, which is equivalent to about 6% of the world's capital market. So it's a massive amount of money. And as Fethi said, 10% of that money going into VC, or 3 to 10% of that money going into VCs, is a huge, huge power, if you think about it. And one more thing about family offices is they do have this generational thing, that, it's a consequence of them being another consequence of them having patient capital is that they do believe in these people. They're looking to more than just financial gain. They're looking to build the future for their kids. And another reason I think why we see more and more family offices investing directly into VCs is because the next generations like us coming into the business want to do this, want to get involved with this, know much more about this and understand this culture better than the prior generation. So we are putting our work into this, we're putting our networks into this.
And what advice would you guys have for early stage startups? Like how can they educate themselves about some of the benefits of using this strategy?
Well, I think really like what you guys said is really important, because at the end of the day, when you think about family offices, like I told, we have many different divisions. You guys have different divisions too. So let's say when we invest in startups, it's not only that we're going to be just focusing on one sector.
Right.
The thing we can leverage is that, for example, we have an airline company, we have a retail shoe business, we had a cinema business. So it's like very different. Like, let's say, when I say 10% to invest in VC, you can have their real estate, energy, whatever that is. And then you can actually leverage that around it. And when, let's say for me personally, when I invest in a startup, I immediately think about my network. What other families do I know that would be interested in this?
Right.
And for these family offices, yes, this is a very important part, and the ticket sizes are rather smaller. That's why everyone actually wants to create that network, so they actually start investing together with each other. Even if that's not in their area of focus, they want to build that relationship and get it going. So I think when you guys are looking into taking investments, comparing VCs and family offices, I think it's not apple to apple. They both have different benefits, and I think it's always good to have each of them in the portfolio in your cap table. Yeah.
So if you're a startup, like, how do you know? What are the signs that this would be a good strategy? Like, are you looking for certain kinds of startups? Are you looking in certain kinds of industries? Like, what is sort of the synthesis of that?
For me?
Anyone?
Go.
Anyone?
Oh.
So, I think it's also important to understand from a family office perspective, which stage do they get into, right? Because very few family offices want to be very early stage, right? Because they're typically not built for that kind of high death rate kind of a startup ecosystem, right? They typically will want to come in at a pre-Series A or maybe a Series A level, and they might even co-invest with the VC fund initially,
exactly.
right? Like for our family offices, because I was an entrepreneur myself, and I just liked building things, we specifically had a strategy to go very early stage, where I mentored the companies myself. So it was more of my face than the family's face in front of it. And then when we set up a venture capital fund, which did early stage investments, our family offices are now moved out of early stage. We'll now do more like pre-Series A,
Right.
Series A, more like global stuff than India. And then a lot of the family offices investing into our fund are the ones saying, you know what, we don't want the messiness of the early stage stuff. You know what, you handle that, keep it off our balance sheet. We don't want these things over here. And then when they get big enough, we'll invest alongside you. So, you have to, as a startup, just like we're going to do research on you, you need to research on us, right? And understand, where are we going to invest? Are we going to be early stage, late stage, mid stage? Where are we going to come in? And, so if you're an early stage startup applying to somebody that's, let's say, a Series A investor, we'll listen to you, but we're not going to invest.
Right.
So.
That's really interesting, because there's a trend now, a global trend, where very large corporations have their own incubators, or they have an entrepreneur in residence, or and the reason they're doing that is because they want a little bit of that magic, that startup magic, that energy. It doesn't work that often. I mean, the failure rate is pretty high for the corporate incubators and accelerators. And so my question is, like, and there is something to that, the whole thing about the magic, the magic and the creativity and innovation and disruption. Clearly, investment strategies are not my forte here, but is that true also for a family investment office strategy? Are you looking for magic? No, because you're number people, right?
I can actually talk to both of them, because I'm managing a family office as well as a corporate related venture capital. So if we first started with the family office, we realized the asset classes of venture capital and private equity have the most returns, because all other asset classes in the long run, they actually are losing to inflation. And then venture capital on top has like this mission where you're, as I said, developing the next generations. So we already had exposure to family office, but as he said, the lesser the complexity of the family office, the more earlier and the more personal and the more smaller investments you look at, and more regional. Whereas as it grows and as you get more and more staff and capability of looking at other investments, then your industries, your geographies, and your stages will advance, and you'll be starting to invest maybe more and more money into it. And then on the holding side with the businesses, we did realize there's this magic, there's something happening, there's a storm coming, because we're in quite classical industries such as automotive and production, manufacturing. So we see this big dark cloud or light cloud, I don't know, it depends on who you're looking at it, which perspective you're looking at it from. It's the dark storm coming and we don't know what's behind it, so we have to find out some way. And the thing is, we know from prior experience within our holding company that it's not easy to steer such a big ship to be able to handle small startups. So to your point about corporate venture capital, there are many examples of failures, and before we did anything, we had over 60 interviews globally, most of them through our family office network, with venture capitalists, with entrepreneurs, with investors, and we found out that corporate venture capital is not easy way to go. So that's why we have a pseudo-independent fund, and the fund is structured much like a venture capital, with its like very strict industrial goals, very strict size, very strict geography. But with the family office side, it's much more, as you said, personal. Like if we, as a family office, present the opportunity to the investors, if they feel they like it, if they feel like they like the entrepreneurs, and then if we see that there's a potential, then we'll go invest in it.
It's similar with us too. I mean, so for us, we invest like in Series A, maybe a little earlier or later, but really Series A is the sweet spot. We invest like in healthcare, AI, and esports. But whenever we get these deals, and let's say it comes as a Series B or very early stage, then we cannot invest with as the SAS Ventures brand, but then we can always take it to the family office where anyone in the family can invest personally. So once they start investing personally, that's out of the scope. It's on the family office side. But then once the company gets more interesting or different for what fits in the criteria, then we bring it to the SAS Ventures board, so that way we can make decisions if we want to invest again there. So similar for what you guys said.
You know, I think also CVCs tend to be more sectoral, so they're more like, they're very vertical, right? So they tend to set up their accelerators in the area they already operate in. But you know, these days sectors seem to come in and out of fashion so quickly, right? Cryptocurrency was here and gone, right? I mean, what happened? But I think family offices tend to be more thematic, right? They're a little more, they're going to be a lot more horizontal. They're going to play it out. They'll probably do a bunch of investments in the same area or around areas they understand. And therefore, you know, like you said, they sort of understand, or they can see from their own ventures or their own network a trend forming way before a VC can. And they have the flexibility to immediately change their themes as soon as they see a change in scenario. I don't think CVCs, because again, CVCs are not being managed like, Microsoft is not going to get managed by Satya, right? It's going to get managed by some guy that they found who's going to manage this thing for them. Where is his personal involvement? Versus from the family side, you're going to have it personally involved. I mean, I have an IC, but you know, my real IC is the dinner table, right? Because every night it's like, what's happening with XYZ, or what's happening with, you know, this venture or that venture, or you lost us money there, right? So we are a lot more, I guess, accountable to the families that are investing alongside us, and but we have the flexibility to be thematic versus sectoral.
Right.
Just one more point. I remember an earlier discussion about 7-8 years ago, before startups became such a hot topic in this region. It's in the US, it has been going on for a while. When I first took some of the opportunities to my parents before we had all these structures to invest, and I said, oh, we have to invest $100,000 in this, and she's like, are you going to be managing this? No, it's somebody else who's invested in this. She's like, will you bring, when are you going to return this money? I'm like, I don't know, it might not return. She's like, do you know how many batteries we need to sell to earn that money?
Okay, so I have one more question, and I want each one of you to give your take on this question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Right. So you talked a bit about the big, black, scary cloud coming at you. We talked a little bit about magic, and so I just wonder, I mean, we don't have to talk about either one of those things, by the way. What is the future of the Family Investment Office? Like, what does that look like? What are the opportunities for entrepreneurs?
Well, I think, like I said, it's going to be more and more, the family offices are going to be more and more involved in this area, because, like you just said, we're going to, the younger generation, when they come up, you know, when you look at it, the first generation or second generation, they build up the conventional business for maybe like 50 years, and then once you come up, you may not want to work in that same business. So you eventually go and want to invest in new things. So that's why I think there's going to be more and more appetite to invest in more startups. And like same thing for me, because from personal experience, when I first came back from college, it was like, you know, yeah, these are nice, good old industry businesses, but I want to know what's out there, you know, what's going to be new. And I remember one conversation we had with our parents. This was like maybe 10 years ago, before even I went to college. They said, you know, you shouldn't be focusing on, yes, we're doing this business in the family office and you're going to do this. You shouldn't focus on that. Like, why don't you come up something with and say, now we've been focusing on different geographies, but now we have something in Africa, you know? So now we have 3 investments in Africa. I don't know how much they understand and know about it, but it's like, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Whatever startup conference I attend, I always hear there's some sort of government agency trying to get that location to be the hottest spot. And there is a sort of a war going on between the scenes where all the governments are trying to be the hottest spot for startups in terms of ecosystems, incentives, just being an attraction center. And this is quite important because, as you know, startups' value, most of the value comes from the exit. And if you have the bigger market, hotter market, your exit value is going to be greater. And you see startups migrating from Europe to US, from Turkey to Europe, US. This migration is happening towards the biggest, hottest markets. So aside from all these, so in order to keep this market hot and good, obviously some things like investment prospects, exit prospects, which are purely financial, political, I'm not going to get into that, or incentives given by the government, I'm also not going to go into that, but I'm going to come back to Fethi's point that family offices, investors and VCs kind of like us need to stick together and then make good investments and lead these companies well and use our global networks to get them more global so that we have examples of success, so that the attention is drawn to this region, that there are very good companies from this region and they can appear. And frankly, when we started with Vinci, so Vinci is a more strategic investor. Our focus is Turkey, UK, and Germany. We did not think we'd be getting many advanced stage companies, like stage A companies from Turkey, but we got wonderful companies, and we got so many beautiful companies that even I, being from here, wasn't aware of this. So we need to lead by example.
Yeah, those are all really, really great points. Would you like to add something?
No,
also,
sorry,
at some point, I want to know the West Texas story because that's kind of blowing my mind still. But if you would kind of give some conclusion, your concluding remarks to this, and then we can get some questions.
No, so I think, and I've been speaking at family office conferences, and they're sort of becoming popular now. And there is definitely a lot of excitement in family offices about investing directly into ventures, right? And I think it's because, in the last 10 years, we've been through 2 up cycles and 2 down cycles. So we've been through 2 cycles as a family investment entities. And, people have come out and made money. Like, for example, in India, I know that Flipkart, which is India's answer to Amazon, which got bought by Walmart, and Oyo. So I was a personal investor into Oyo in the first round, and they're now a unicorn. Those exits played a huge role in families getting very excited about venture. Because they finally saw that 10 years later, you did get money back, you did get exits out of it, and people who individually invested, either from their own balance sheet or from a family office entity, came out on top. And the stories that the entrepreneurs also tell is that those early investors really helped us build the business.
Right.
And I think those kind of stories, like you said, they need to be circulated a lot more.
Yeah, I think that to me is like key to the messaging of the opportunities that lie in this, this financial and investment strategy. Because I'm very new to the topic, and there was not a lot of information out there to help educate. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot in the trade and with B2B, with what you guys do in the financial press, but I had a really hard time finding case studies and stories. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I think just to say, I think as family office, next generation, as they call it, next gen, we want better control on the investments we make. We don't want to see or pay high management fees and wait 10 years to see our capital back. I think a lot of us feel that we can do better with our capital, and therefore we're getting way more active, and we want to put in direct checks. We'll work with funds, right? Even like we work with funds, and we've started a fund also, but we want that feel, we want that touch, we want to meet the people we're investing into, and I think that trend is going to continue. I think 9% could very easily be 20% in the next 5 to 6 years.
Interesting. Yeah. Are there specific compliance issues for you guys, or is it still all under the same regulations?
If you have the third-party capital and you set up the fund, then yes, but personally in our case, right now it's strictly in the family, and so that's why there aren't compliance issues.
Right.
They're just regulatory normal things that you just have to pass as everyone, but obviously, when you do co-investments, etc., the things can change.
Right.
And we love doing co-investments, and so we're like, yeah, if you have the third-party capital, yeah, then you're gonna have the compliance.
Very good.
Yeah, it's more structuring issues usually, how to work with co-investments, how to structure co-investments, and because the issue of the ideal structure otherwise is, as in terms of returns at the end, like tax efficiency and all that stuff, is not that much big of a deal at the moment, because we just want to succeed.
You know, one thing I should add, and I think it's the last point, understand family offices tend to invest in multiple rounds. And I think they're one of those continuous investors you'll have that as you perform, they'll come in with more and more capital, again, because they're not constricted by saying I'm a seed fund, or I'm a pre-Series A fund, or I'm a Series B fund. And I've seen family offices invest 6 to 7 times in the same company, and that's a huge, huge boost to a startup to know that whenever I need money, I'm going to have a particular portion of my round already ready to go. Yeah. I think that's when you look, if a startup's looking at a family office, they should know that those guys tend to be investors that can invest multiple times.
Right, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I guess the terms also are better with the family offices rather than VCs. You know, I'll take 30%.
We're not going to control you, right? We don't have the time. Right?
Exactly. We'll help you. We'll be there as your advisory board, or if that's the observatory board or whatever. But we'll be there. If you need anything, we'll help you. But we're not going to squeeze you on. We want 30% of the company. We want 2 board seats, etc. All of that.
Right.
I think also, given this like big capital and this, the venture capital being 3 to 10% of the portfolio, it's not like venture capital where their bane of existence depends on these companies being successful. For family offices, it's like more of a mission, more of like, if it comes, it's good. If it doesn't come, we've tried, kind of thing.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, you guys. I think, Bill, we have time for a question and a half.
Probably time for one question and closing thoughts. So one question right there. If we get that person a microphone, that'd be great. So quick question, quick response. And
I've been to quite a few tech conferences. This is one of the most interesting panels that I've listened to. So thank you for that. Question. I like numbers. So I would love if you can answer this with numbers. What percentage of your portfolio as of today is invested outside your home territory? That's one. What's the best exit you've ever had, either IRR or cash on cash? And what's the worst investment you've ever done, and how much did you have to write off?
Thank you. Would you mind, and I didn't say this up front, but just identify yourself, name and organization?
Yeah, we can't see you.
I don't have a name.
Yeah, yes, you do. I can tell people your name, so.
If you can name 2 of the characters on my T-shirt, then I'll tell you my name.
It's an Avenger shirt.
No, it's not.
All right.
It's He-Man. My name is Engin Yenidunya. I live in Japan. That's all you need to know.
Very good.
Well, on percentage-wise, so I would say it's around, if I include the fund investments that we've done too, it would be around 50-50 at the moment, I'd say. And on IRR and cash on cash, so we just set up SAS Ventures almost 2 years ago now. So I wish we had an exit in 18 months, but you know, it's going to take a little bit of time. But I can say this, that of 6 of the companies that we've invested in the last 2 years, all had an uplift. And the multiple average is around 1.7. So I think that gives you a little bit. And was there another question?
There were like 3 parts.
The third one, I think
The worst investment.
Worst investment. So it was my first investment. This was, I think, 4 years ago. And it was an unlucky investment, and it was called Carhu. It was aggregating all the demand, like with Uber and other car hailing companies. But the founder wasn't, he deceived us basically. And, but that was good because then when I went back in the family office, my parents said, we're glad this didn't work out, because if it, on your first investment, if you had a home run, then we couldn't, I don't know what we would do with you.
So maybe short, quick answers would be good.
Go ahead.
For Vinci Venture Capital, our first investment was a month ago, so I can't talk about that. But as for the family office, we're about the same, 50-50 Turkey versus outside of Turkey. The investments are quite new as well. We had one investment that offered to come out at the par value right now. Some investors are taking it, some of them are not taking it, and we haven't had any up rounds yet.
So we've made 70 investments altogether, out of which about 18 are in the US, the remaining are in India. I think the best investment would definitely be Oyo. We got in at about a $500,000 valuation, got out at $1 billion. That was about 260, 270x.
It's not bad, man.
Right?
There is hope for us.
The worst investment, so obviously somebody asked a question on Saturday, and I said, in venture investing, you either have a ROI or you have learnings, right? And you tend to have more learnings than ROI. But I think, although we've had shutdowns and we've always learned from them, I think one of the worst investments we ever made, and not because of the entrepreneur, is because of the advisor we made it through. Was that we immediately, as soon as we put in the money, we realized that the founding team wasn't working together, and that's because the way we follow up with them, and then we had to lock in the money into a fixed deposit for like 3 years till we figured out a way to get it back, right? But we did, and we got about 60-65% back.
Interesting.
But that was just it was bad because of the amount of time and energy it took to just take the money back, right? So that was it.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have time for another one, or should we
No.
wrap this up?
No, so
okay.
quick close and...
Yeah, well, thank you all. Very, very interesting. And I think that, the takeaway for our startups and for everybody is that there are always options. And some of them are lesser known options for startups and, maybe more mature startups. But this is a trend to watch for sure and to get educated on. And my advice to you, and to you, and to you, and to you, and to Bill, is go break some rules, and have fun.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You guys are lovely.
Let's thank this wonderful panel. Awesome, awesome job. Thank you so much.